The fact that the British police just had their butts handed to them, judicially speaking, doesn't mean they're going to give up on Tommy Robinson. As far as I'm concerned, it means they're going to go after him
even harder now.
Viva Frei, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler, and I've been following Tommy Robinson and his judicial plight in the UK for going on 6 years now. Tommy Robinson, for those of you who don't know, he's the UK version of Alex Jones.
Fast forward a year, Tommy Robinson is doing a Facebook Live outside of the courthouse in the context of another trial for which there has also been a publication ban under Section 4.2 of the Contempt of Court Act. Tommy Robinson is filming on public property, by all accounts is reporting stuff that has already been reported and is therefore in the public domain, but at one point during the Facebook live stream interacts with the defendants. Now, at this point in time, the trial had come to an end, but a verdict had not yet been rendered by the jury. Tommy Robinson gets arrested for disorderly conduct or disturbance of the peace, not actually for the contempt, and while in custody, the judge discovers that Tommy Robinson was live streaming outside the courthouse and decides to pursue contempt proceedings. And within a period of 5 hours, arrests Tommy Robinson on contempt proceedings, charges him, tries him, and sentences him to 13 months in prison within a 5-hour time frame. Not only does the judge do all of this within a period of 5 hours, but the judge also orders a publication ban, also under Section 4.2 of the Contempt of Court Act, prohibiting reporting on Tommy Robinson's arrest, condemnation, and sentencing to 13 months in prison. Now, one does not even have to have the slightest inkling to like anything about Tommy Robinson to appreciate that there's something potentially procedurally improper about what just transpired.
He is the man that people have been indoctrinated into thinking they hate, and people think that they hate him, not knowing that there's absolutely nothing to hate about the guy, despite the fact that you may disagree with some of his politics. He's the guy that people have the strongest opinions of, and they have no idea why they think what they think, except for the fact that they've been brainwashed over the course of years into thinking that he's a demon that he absolutely is not. That's Tommy Robinson, and he surprisingly actually had a mild W in the UK judicial system. Tommy Robinson is a man who is called an Islamophobe, a white nationalist, an anti-Semite, and a Mossad agent, I kid you not. And he was recently arrested for participating in a protest against anti-Semitism because he's such a persona non grata. He was swiftly arrested after, I think, being pepper sprayed and arguably assaulted by the UK police. If you haven't seen that video, I'll show you some highlights of Tommy Robinson's most recent arrests.
Tommy, shame on you. Come on, mate. Shame on you. Well, of course I can, yes. Yeah, because the boss is
And it wasn't until now, I believe, that they set up a Section 35 that does give them the power to pretty much arrest anyone they want. I think they took, 70 cops and pepper spraying him in the face. And they also doxed his home address. They wanted him to give his home address on camera, which would endanger his children. I mean, it seemed like a sort of Putin-esque state persecution of an individual.
So Tommy Robinson got arrested for being present at a protest against anti-Semitism. The man who's an Islamophobe, white nationalist, anti-Semite, Zionist Mossad agent got arrested because he was not wanted. His presence was not appreciated at a protest against anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom. Well, Tommy Robinson took that to court, and surprise, surprise, he actually won, and the judge actually gave what I can only describe as a judicial spanking to the police for their absolute, utter incompetence in dealing with Tommy Robinson and arresting him for no damn good reason.
From the courts and tribunals judiciary in the Westminster Magistrates Court District Judge Magistrates Court Sternberg between REX versus Stephen Lennon.
That's right, people, because Tommy Robinson's real name is not Tommy Robinson. It's Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon, and everybody thinks it's the biggest gotcha. What a fraud the man has to be. His real name is not Tommy Robinson.
Whoop-de-doo, moving on.
Ruling on submission of no case to answer. Mr. Bryan for the prosecution, Mr. Williamson, KC, King's Counsel for the defendant. Introduction. Stephen Lennon, the defendant, faces one charge that on 26 November 2023 at London in the Borough of Westminster, he failed without reasonable excuse to comply with a direction given to him under Section 35 of the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014 in that he failed to leave the locality specified, namely outside of 215 Strand, London, WC2R 1AP. This is not a scene out of The Simpsons. This is not a scene out of Idiocracy. This is not even a chapter out of 1984. 4, the law is actually called the Antisocial Behavior Policing Act because right now in the UK, they're in the business of policing antisocial behavior. Antisocial behavior. It's not a joke, but it's a joke, but it's not funny. Tommy Robinson, aka Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon, submitted that there was no case to answer, and the court agreed with Tommy Robinson, and in something that's a little judicially unusual, the judge issued a written decision to motivate the fact that there was no case to answer. Wait until you read this because the highlights are the judge giving a judicial spanking to the UK police who don't know how to write a citation, who don't know how to do their jobs, and blame their inability to do their jobs on dyslexia. Paragraph 4. At the outset, I record that it is unusual for a magistrate's court to give a written decision on a submission of no case to answer. Why, then, am I giving written judgment when the court would normally give a brief oral ruling? The answer are that the parties, the press, and the public are entitled to know why this court has concluded as it has. Providing written reasons will also assist any higher court to understand why I have reached this decision should there be such a challenge to my decision. Look, I'm going to spoil the surprise. There is no case to answer because the police screwed up on their paperwork, but even had they not screwed up on their paperwork, they would have been wrong to have done what they did in the first place. And here is a highlight that the court notes as to why the police explained away their inability to do their paperwork properly. The portion of the judgment I'm about to read to you is the evidence that was adduced by one of the police officers who explains away why the dispersal notice, to call it that, I think is not the proper term, but you know what I mean. The notice that Tommy Robinson had to leave the area, why there were clerical errors in it as relates to the date, well, that had to do with the dyslexia of the officer. Paragraph 12, in re-examination, he said, that being the officer, the document in the Form 35A was most likely typed on a laptop in the back of a public order carrier, trying to make 20 decisions. Paragraph 13, in answer to questions from the court, he said, he being the officer, A, he is dyslexic and made errors updating the form that may be due to the conditions. His laptop was dying and he was updating the form. B, the order came in at 10:14 on 26 November. There is not a version of the form recording 10:14 as the start time on that day. It would have been recorded on an incident log. He issued the defendant with a Section 35 dispersal notice and tried to go through the form with him. He asked the defendant a number of questions. The defendant was angry and upset that he was being issued with the notice. There was a lot of shouting and it was hard to get the defendant's attention. His presence was likely to cause harassment to other people who were attending the march. Apparently, at first, the police thought the protest was a pro-Palestinian protest, from what I understand. And by the way, Tommy Robinson is going to be on the channel tomorrow, as at the time of shooting this vlog. If you're watching this in the future, let me know how it is, but go back and watch that interview. He's going to clarify. The police apparently thought there was a pro-Palestine protest that Tommy Robinson was attending, but then they found out it was a protest against anti-Semitism that Tommy Robinson was attending, and they decided that his presence could qualify as, could lead to harassment of other participants, and they told Tommy Robinson, you're persona non grata, nobody wants you here, disperse or you're going to get arrested. And he said, thanks, but no thanks. And then they arrested him. They arrested him in virtue of an authorization that was totally erroneous, had the wrong date on it, was totally unlawful, and they arrested him nonetheless. And wait until I read you some more sections from this decision. He accepted that the defendant was repeatedly saying that he was working. He asked the defendant to disperse based on his being a former member of the EDL rather than being a journalist. He had a clear direction from his supervisors to issue a notice under Section 35 and had consulted with his superiors and an inspector. If the defendant said he wanted to leave, he would not have issued the direction. The original notice was retained at Lambeth Police Station. He believes that Inspector Fisher gave authority for the Section 35 direction. He administered it to the defendant. Inspector Sullivan was the supervisor for that deployment. It's this Section 35 authorization that's the lawful paper that ordered Tommy Robinson to disperse because they don't think he's a journalist. They think he's a member of the English Defence League or a former member of the EDL. Thus, he can never be a journalist and he can never attend protests for the purposes of journalizing. And so they issue this form. They say, Tommy Robinson, please disperse. He says, no, I'm being a journalist. And then they arrest him in virtue of a form that was totally deficient. First, Inspector Parker's decision to authorize the use of the powers contained in Section 35 was based on a mistake of fact. I find that it was a material mistake of fact. His evidence was that he based the decision to give authority under Section 34 to make use of the powers in Section 35 on the basis that it was required to prevent disorder at a march by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. That was not the march that was taking place on 26 November, which was a march to protest against anti-Semitism. In other words, you had it ass backwards. You had your facts totally wrong. You tried to bar Tommy Robinson from what you thought was a pro-Palestine protest, when in fact it was an anti-Semitism protest, a protest against anti-Semitism, and yet despite that, you still go and arrest Tommy Robinson most viciously. Paragraph 23. Second, the decision he reached referred to Home Office guidance, which he had never read as part of the rationale for making the order. Whilst cutting and pasting from guidance per se may not be objectionable, the authorizing officer had not considered the Home Office guidance he was referring to. That does not mean it was necessary for him to have read every word of the guidance document, but the mere rote entry of material provided by others does not show that the officer did consider the guidance or apply it while making his direction in this case. Paragraph 25. Third, and importantly in my judgment, the authorization provided to the court records that it was dated and signed on 24 November 2023. It recorded that the powers it authorized could have been exercised between 10 and 23:59 on 26 November 2023. This was not the authorization which was in force when the defendant was arrested. What is clear is that the final version, which was the authorization said to underlie the direction given to the defendant, was not presented to the court, and there was no evidence of the existence of that authorization beyond Inspector Parker's statement that it was recorded in the bronze log. The log was not produced to the court or put in evidence, nor was the version of the authorization relied on by the prosecution. I am unable to conclude that the authorization in force at the time of the defendant's arrest was properly put in writing and signed and dated at the time it was given as required by Section 34(4) of the 2014 Act. Garbage in, garbage out, but anything goes when you're trying to get public enemy number one at Tommy Robinson. But the judge doesn't just conclude that the authorization, the piece of paper upon which they arrested Tommy Robinson, was totally deficient, such that they had no authorization to legally arrest Tommy Robinson in the first place. The judge comes to the conclusion that even had it been authorized, even had it been properly issued, they still would have been wrong to do what they did, and here's why. Regrettably, the evidence I received shows that the order relied on by the prosecution in this case was not properly recorded, was not properly updated, and ultimately, I conclude, not valid. Paragraph 28. If I am wrong about my conclusions above, and there is evidence of the existence of a valid authorization on which a properly directed court might convict, I conclude in the alternative that the second limb of the test set out in Galbraith, and I think I'm mispronouncing that, is also met. The evidence of Inspector Parker about the circumstances in which he came to make, vary, and update the authorization was confused and confusing. There was a concerning lack of documentary evidence to support this evidence. I conclude that it was so weak and tenuous that it does not provide a basis on which a reasonable tribunal could convict. Bottom line, the court comes to the finding that that form, that authorization that the police invoked to justify ordering the dispersal of Tommy Robinson and when he refused his arrest, it was invalid on its face. But even if a court came to the conclusion that it was valid on its face, they exercised their powers abusively, capriciously, in a way that would not allow any reasonable court to convict. In other words, if you're going to order the dispersal of people, if you're going to tell them they have to leave, if you're going to order that journalists can't be journalists, if you're going to violate people's rights, you better have a damn good reason to do it, and you did not justify it in this case. It was, and I'm quoting, confused and confusing. It was ill thought out. It was willy-nilly, and you don't get away with it even if you had not screwed up on the form originally. So no case, but even if there was a case, I still would have dismissed it. Now, is this the big W for Tommy Robinson? Hell no, because the process is the punishment. Is this a big W for Tommy Robinson? Hell no, because it means the police are going to make sure to dot their I's and cross their T's the next time they want to come after Tommy Robinson, and maybe in light of this embarrassment, someone's home. And maybe in light of this embarrassment, they're going to come after Tommy Robinson even harder. But the bottom line, it's a small W for Tommy Robinson. It's a small L for the police, who without a doubt have been abusing of their police powers. And maybe it'll be a little check and balance on the powers of the police in the UK, but I won't hold my breath. That being said, if you like what I do, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. Above all else, share the channel. That helps it grow. But most importantly, get out there, exercise, sunlight, eat healthy, talk to people in real life, and now you know your vlog. Peace out, peeps. Booyah!
And yet again, Tommy Robinson has been arrested, and yet again, I'm not sure exactly what he's supposed to have done wrong, Paul.
Yeah, the moment Tommy Robinson arrested at campaign against anti-Semitism march as celebrities turn out to support British Jews. So this was one of two arrests at today's march. The first one, as Darius pointed out earlier, was for actual anti-Semitism. This one, however, for me, is political.
Yeah.
He's persona non grata, Tommy Robinson. He is on their side of the argument, but the people that are involved don't want him to be championing their side of the argument.
Yeah.
The police, I mean, if you see the footage, there was about 70 or 80 police who pepper sprayed him in the face, took him out and arrested him for, you can always find a reason to arrest someone. That's the great thing about being a policeman. That's the great thing about the British law.